So today we'll be looking at the Java implementation for Nigerian Social Welfare Commission awards, like awarding maintenance allowance to citizens according to their marital status. So if you are single, you are getting 500 naira. If you are married, you get 2,000. If you are separated, you get 3,000. If you are divorced, you get 4,000 naira. So I believe this is switch case and not select case statement to write a Java program that captures the marital status of a citizen and pay him or her an allowance as appropriate. Compute and display the total amount paid to all beneficiaries. So first thing we need to do is to be able to interpret this particular question. We've been given the conditions. So based on the marital status and the amount, this is clear. But what is not clear is the source of the data. So we need the source for the data, that is the status. Like, how do we get the data for is he married, separated, divorced? They just mentioned that we should capture, like a Java program to capture. So whenever statements like this are being used, like capture reads, and all that, you should know you are interacting with the user. Unlike this third assignment, which is just to like do a logical calculation. So we are not expecting anything from the user, basically. So whether it's the value of even with this, we'll still probably expect the values of A, B, and C. I believe so. But there are some exercises that you don't need to interact with the user through the input, like keyboard or anything. But there are implementations like this, like when you read captures, reads, and all that, you need to know that you need to accept the input from the user. So in this instance, they asked us to calculate the total amount paid to all the beneficiaries. That means we are not just calculating for a single beneficiary, but for beneficiaries. So how do we know the number of beneficiaries we'll be calculating for? That's another input that needs to be collected from the user. So we need to know the number and then the count of all the beneficiaries, and then collect the data for all these beneficiaries. So for each beneficiary, we need to know their marital status, which could be single, married, separated, or divorced. And based on that, we'll be able to calculate their allowance, display it, and then show the total number of allowance paid to all the beneficiaries. So yeah, let's jump right in. So to create a kind of pseudocode of what we need to do, we need to accept the beneficiary count, and then we need to do what? We need to collect the marital status of each beneficiary, and the third one will be compute allowance for each beneficiary, and the fourth one would be display individual allowance with the status. So the fifth one would be to display the total allowances paid. So once you are able to interpret the question as this, so you won't actually have much problem. So with this you can say single, married. The way they wrote the separated is not separated, separated, and then divorced. I don't know the difference between divorced and separated. I don't know, but it is what it is. So this is basically what we need to do. Let us separate this for readability. So yeah, this is basically the interpretation of this question. Single 500. Let me add this. Single 500, married 2000. So we don't have to like go back to the question again. Divorced 4000. So yeah, pretty much that's it. So yeah, let's start with the first step. So we need to know the beneficiary count. So whenever you have to deal with input, I will even suggest you actually import Java or Java utilities at the same time using this asterisk. So we could have written scanner like this to import scanner, but to just import everything we need, just import it like this. So this is our like public static void main. This is something you just need to memorize. Like it's just like the main method that through it we can access and trigger the method and everything inside this class. So through the main method, it's just like a conventional, like it's just conventional to Java. So the first thing, we need to accept the beneficiary count. So let's start by creating an instance of our input, which would keep on reusing throughout the application. So this is also something you probably need to memorize. It's basically simple. So nothing is happening at the moment. If you run the application, nothing. So we need to tell the user that we need an input. So with that we use the print. So enter beneficiary count. So with this we are printing a message to say enter beneficiary count, but there is no way to enter the input. So we need to accept the beneficiary count, so which will be an integer using the input and next int. So that's to accept an input. So if we run the code now, we'll probably get an error because this is the so it's expecting an input, but because the way this online compiler is set up, so I need to put in the input before even running the code. So if I run it now, you see that it's actually compiling without any error. So to see that it's actually compiling, so let's just quickly print out the count. So that we can see. So you can see count is 5. So count is 5. Yeah, so we've actually succeeded in getting this. So yeah, congrats. How do I mark this as done? Yeah, we've done this. So yeah, number 1 is done. We've gotten the count. So if we change this to 50, yeah, it becomes 50, and that's the beneficiary count. So right now we now need to collect the marital status of each beneficiary. Up, it's going from 1 to the last person. So to do that, we will need a kind of data structure. So for better readability, for good readability, we can be adding comment. So accept beneficiary count, and then we can say collect and store beneficiaries marital status. So this is the second thing we need to do. So we need a kind of data structure. Will be a string array, an array of strings, which will be citizens marital status. So your variable name should be very clear, such that even through reading the variable name, I should be able to understand what is inside this memory location. Unlike if someone just come and put statuses, I don't know, is it status of being online or offline? Is it status of being active or inactive? So that is not clear enough. So we need to be able to do this. But remember, so array has a fixed length, and that's basically the difference between a normal array and array list. So if it were to be an array list, we can say so we want it to be this and that. We can keep on adding elements, but for normal array we need to be able to define the length. So we need to be able to define the length. So since we already have the beneficiary count, so we can basically say it will be an array of this length, So with that, we already have this created. So you know, in the previous video I mentioned that if we create an array of integers, the default values will be what? Will be zeros, but for strings, default values will probably be null. So let's try and put that out. You know, if you are printing arrays, you should use the string so as to be able to get the content of the array. So you can see we have null. So if this were to be 25, for example, or 24, you have 24 items set as null. So that's basically setting the initial value. Now the question is, what if I enter a non-valid number like 0? Do I still want to continue? So we can put a check on that, like say validate beneficiary count. So let's just put this as to do. We'll come back to it. So let's assume we have a valid number. So we'll come back to this. So null. So you know, with the plan is to collect and store beneficiary status. So we can just do a for loop for int I is equal to 0, I is less than beneficiary count, and then I plus plus. So we need to use the input field again to accept input from the user. So we can just do system out print enter beneficiary, enter the marital status of citizen number, just add the I. So if we do a console.log up, like run this code, oh, this should be, let us add this so as to have it in the next line. So as you can see, so this should, for proper readability, we should just do I plus 1. with that we'll get 1 2 3 4, because you don't want to be showing the user citizen 01, citizen 0. Nobody wants to be 0. We want to start from 1. So let's just add this for visual representation actually. So we've been able to prompt the user with the message, but we need to give them the opportunity to supply a value. So we can just basically copy this and say, so this will be a string actually, string marital status is equal to, so this will be a next line, and then we'll now set this value based on the index of this beneficiary count and say citizen's marital status of this position will be the marital status supplied. So that's basically what we need to do. So if we are to print this out, print the marital status, so for this input, so I need to supply the input ahead. So let's just run this really quick so you can see single. So I'm not so sure why this editor is not supplying for the first value, like for the first array index. It's quite strange, but I supplied 5, which should actually be 5. Or let me just make this static. Maybe it can only accept and make this constant. Let me use this static. Okay, now we have it assigned. That was because I supplied an initial input value. So we'll change that later. So let's just continue. So yeah, you can see we are actually getting the single. So if I want to change this to married, we'll say married. Let's pick another one. Separated, divorced, single. We have single. Yeah. So we have separated, single, married, divorced, and that's it. So we've been able to collect the marital status, and we've been able to save it in this particular variable or memory location. So the next thing to do according to our plan is to compute the allowance for each beneficiary and then display the allowance. So what we can do is we can basically say we want to same way we are actually storing the beneficiary's marital status, we can compute the allowance as well by saying integer array will be, instead of citizens marital status, it will be citizens allowances, which will be an integer array of this beneficiary count as well. So this will be holding their marital status, and this will be holding their their allowances. So to be able to calculate the allowance, so outside this main method, we can declare a static method which will return an integer, and we can call it calculate allowance. So you can see sometimes we have the public, we have static, we have private. So static basically means this method is available to the class name, to the class actually, to the class. So and for public, it means this is actually available to this class alone. So for the public, you can, the advantage is when you create an instance of this class. Let's say we say I don't want to go there, my class is equal to new and this, something like this. So you are creating an instance of this class, so this main method will also be available. That is why it's very important that we make this public, so it will be available for every instance of that class. So yeah, let's continue. Static, this is the return value. The type of the value will be returning from this function, which is integer. And for this particular method, we're expecting the status as a string, and then this where we now use the select case or even the switch method of checking the status. So we want to check if it's single, if, let me just copy this, if it's single, if it's married, if it's separated, or if it's divorced. So what we need to do here is to calculate the allowance. You can just set this to nothing at the moment, and then based on the status, if it's single, we say allowance is equal to what? 500, and then we break. So same thing if it's divorced, we set the allowance, and then which is 2000. Single man they suffer by 500. Okay, 500, yeah. So you know go buy more than, you know, if you buy more than orbit bread, sorry. So divorced 4000, everything comes with a price. So defaults, you can also set the default, which will be allowance is equal to 0, and after this switch statement we can basically return the allowance. So if we run the code once again, nothing would actually change because we haven't invoked this allowance. So you know at this point we are getting the Marital status. So instead of printing it out, we basically set the Marital status, and then we can also calculate the allowance. So we say int citizen allowance is equal to calculate allowance, and then passing the Marital status. So we can actually calculate it over here, and after calculating it, we are setting the citizen's Marital status, and we can as well set the citizen's allowance based on the index to this allowance we are getting. So we can do a log here to check the allowance. So another thing I can do is to actually concatenate so as to see the value ourselves. So separated 3000, single 500, married 2000, divorce 4000, single 500. So you can see, so using a single loop we've been able to calculate and also update the status. You might be wondering, like, if we can basically calculate the allowance here, why do we still need to update this array with the Marital status? So we'll be using that when we'll be working on displaying this. So to display the individual allowance with their status, that is why it's very important with their status. And then before we'll be able to display this, that means we should have stored it somewhere. So that's why it's very important. So we've been able to get the marital status, get the allowance. So the next thing is to display the individual allowance with their status. So we don't want to be displaying it beneath the input where we are expecting them to supply an input. So I'll basically, okay, I've removed it, so I don't want to be showing it there. So I'll make another for loop based on the beneficiary count, and here what I'll basically be doing is I'll be printing out the allowances. So you can generate the test yourself. You can say citizen number, remember to add 1 because indexing starts from 0 in for arrays. So citizen 1 of, so we want to add the marital status. So you can actually do something like this for it to be more simpler. So we can say, so let me leave it like this. It will just be long. So we say citizen number 1 or number 1 2 3 till the end of marital status, probably single, married, Guinea. Or what we can do is, yeah, citizen 1 of marital status, single, is awarded, and then we add the naira, the amount, the allowance awarded this. Yeah, I think that's it actually. So let's try this. So citizen number 1 of separated marital status is awarded 3,500, 2,000, 4,000 and 500. So we've been able to complete this number 4, and the next one will be to display the total allowance. So to display the total allowance so we need another variable. So we can declare that here to say integer total allowances. So you can either set it to 0 or just leave it. So we now go back to where we are calculating the allowance. So each time we calculate the allowance, so we basically add to the total allowance. So each time we calculate new allowance, we see update the total allowances. So each time we calculate for individual allowance, we do what? We update the total allowance. So at the end, the task is to display the total allowances paid. So you will not do this inside the for loop, so that will be outside. So we can do print new line total allowances paid for, if you like you can do for, you can include the count. Sorry, I copied the wrong thing. It should be beneficiary count. For beneficiary, for, let's just make it simple. Total allowances paid is, and then we add the total allowances. So this just to make it simple. So we been able to do for each individual, and then we say total allowances paid is 10,000 naira. So if you update this from divorce to single, you can see. So that's basically how the solution is going to go. So we have a to-do task here to validate the beneficiary count. So imagine no beneficiary count is, so I will return this to this, So imagine no beneficiary count is supplied. So we need to kind of find a way to ensure that we don't proceed with the implementation except a valid beneficiary count is supplied. So with that, we say beneficiary count while beneficiary count is less than 1. So when beneficiary count supplied is just less than 1, so we need to re-trigger this and say enter beneficiary count with count greater than 0, greater than 1. So we add a little information to that, and then we will not be redeclaring this because we already redeclared it, so we just need to update the value. So if you supply is an invalid value, probably 0 to -1 or anything, which is actually less than 0, so you keep on getting this prompt and you will not be able to proceed with this. So while you keep getting this, and then when you supply something like 1, 2 or 3, the process will be able to proceed. So thank you very much. I will be sharing the code for this, and if you have any question, just drop it in the comments. Thanks.